Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Thursday, not Tuesday, but I do have a tag for you. A tag has been percolating various channels on BookTube for a while now. I think I've watched all of the examples of this tag for 2024, including a lot of channels that you wouldn't expect that I watch. A lot of channels whose proprietors would not expect that I watch their channels and who wouldn't want me to. But fortunately, it's still a free platform. I can watch whoever I want. And I was seeing those videos and feeling a little twinge of obligation, but I was ignoring them until somebody in our little corner of BookTube did this tag, and finally somebody did. That was David Novak, who did, yes indeed, the BookTube Mid-Year Freakout Tag for 2024. And if David Novak did it, and if I'm doing it, that means all of you have to do it. I want to see hundreds of versions of this tag by this time next week. This is, as the title indicates, this is when you stop and look at how your reading year is shaping up so far. Now, for some people on BookTube, that is not going to be as big a task as for other people. Thankfully, in the 10 years or so that this tag has been around, BookTube has changed for the better. Maybe it's changed by splintering into smaller and smaller subgroups, but it has changed for the better in one big way, which is that the population of BookTube now reflects the population of the reading world. Almost the whole of the population of the reading world. We have authors, we have editors, we have older people, middle-aged people, younger people, we have a book critic, maybe two book critics, and as a result, these, in addition to all of those different reading styles, we also have different reading rates. Some of us read faster than others. Some of us read very slow, very meditatively, and are very happy with that. So the slow readers, the meditative readers, the careful choosers, the systematic readers, they're going to look at a mid-year freakout tag that asks you to assess your reading for the year so far and think, no big deal. We're talking about 10 books. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But some of us do a lot more than that. We read very fast. I read very fast, and I read all the time. I don't have a gym to go to. I don't have a job to go to. I don't have loving relatives or friends or personal hygiene. I'm not even wearing pants. So I do very little other than read. In fact, the last 2 days, ordinarily I say I do very little other than read and dote on my little dog. There's the needlepoint version right there. But in the last 2 days, we can't go outside. It's boiling hot. It's almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So long dog walks are out of the question. The only time when they'd be even theoretically possible would be first thing in the morning, when it is cooler. And maybe we'll have to come to that, but my little dog is not a morning person. She does not like to get up before 11. And so we have fallen into the habit of me using the early mornings to get some more reading in, finish up the reading of the night, do the overnight emails, plan out the day. I don't think either one of us is going to want to go trekking around in hill and dale at 5 in the morning, but we might have to come to that. Certainly, I doubt that this will be the last heat wave that Boston gets, so it might have to come to that. But as it is, our trips outside are just as frequent, but they are very short. So I've been getting a lot of reading, and that's been true all year. This has been a banner reading year for me. As of the making of this video, so far in 2024, I have read 691 books. That's not including rereads. And it's also discounting a lot of the stuff that I read professionally, which I'm just not going to count as a book. So you can see why the mid-year freakout tag where I would be interested in watching other people's videos, but I'd be shying away from doing it on my own because it involves a lot of toting and lifting. Preparatory to the very end of the year, when I do my year-end book lists for the best and worst books of 2024, I keep careful track of what I'm reading. But all these other channels are doing it, all these pretty well-lit channels, and David Novak is doing it, so, not that David isn't pretty, but all these channels are doing it, and all of you are going to do it now as well, so I thought that I would just buckle down and do it. And you'll notice this tag is age old. It precedes BookTube, I believe. It's at least 15 years old. And I think in the title of this video, I will call this the Mid-Year Freakout Tag 2.0, because this tag originated or was adopted by BookTube when BookTube was 99% YA. When you had bourbon binging, fan rogering, need a shave every morning adults pinwheeling in their arms and screaming at the top of their lungs about YA books, about books written for kids. And that was 9 years ago, 10 years ago. If you'd found BookTube, you could have been forgiven for thinking that was all there was to it. There was barely any pockets of anything else. Now that's thankfully not true. BookTube far more closely resembles the infinite variety of readers out there. And one of the questions in this tag is pretty YA. I mean, some of the rest of them are verge on that, but one of them can only be understood in the context of YA. So for the 2.0 version, I have simply changed that question for another. You'll see what I mean when I get to it. But let's look at the questions. Question number 1 is the best book you've read so far in 2024. And I can't answer this question. I don't mean to start off coy right away. The best book that I've read so far in 2024 is not going to be published in 2024. And I don't know where or when or by whom it will be published. But it wins, if I'm being completely honest, it wins hands down. But in terms of in the parameters that we're understanding for this tag, I think it would probably be Nuclear War by Andy Jacobson so far. I was very happy to see you heard about that book on this channel, I think, long before you heard about it anywhere else. And I was very happy to see that it did, with a little nudging here and there, get a lot of reviews. It got a lot of notices. The paperback's going to have a lot of blurbs. It's not going to have one from me. I mentioned it, talked about how much I loved it on this channel. I also talked about it on CPL Radio's Books of the Week, but I didn't review it myself. But it is excellent. It really is excellent. So that would probably be my number 1 point. My number 2 point. My number 1 as far as what's out in the commercial world. Then question number 2 is best sequel you've read so far. See, this is another slight indication of this tag's YA origin, since YA is all about, the Court of Thorns and Roses, a Court of Mists and Avocados, a Court of Boy X and Boy Y. And I really haven't noticed so far this year anything in the way of an outstanding sequel, I guess. I really haven't noticed that. A couple of the books that I'm going to show you would technically count as sequels. I guess they would count, but I really don't think, oh my God, I can't wait for The Boy of Hot and Cold to have a sequel. So I'm going to just skip this one. There are a couple of questions I'm going to skip here. Okay. Question number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. Question number 4 is most anticipated new release of the second half of the year. And question number 13 is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And as I've done in my Mid-Year Freakout tags for many years, I'm going to combine those 3 questions. They're all asking variants of the same thing. I'm going to combine those 3 questions because this is everything to me. All readers, I believe, set bailiwicks of their own. Even you so-called mood readers. I believe that all the readers set bailiwicks. They set a rough outline shape of what their reading is. Mine might be a little more defined than most people, but it served me well over the years. I really, really enjoy it. And that is the new releases in the American book market in the 15 or 16 genres that interest me. I like to read a good, strong sampling. I'm afraid even with my ego, I can't say it's any more than that. I don't read them all. But I like to read a very strong sampling of those 15 or 16 genres. I like every year to end where I can look back and say, I did not miss a major release in fiction. I did not miss a major release in history. I like to say that. It's not always true, of course. Even in sometimes, most years, it's not true, and I don't even know it's not true. I've just plain missed a book. That happens every year. Where later on, something comes out in paperback, or even I find it at a used bookstore, and I realize, oh, you never got to this in your year. I console myself with what I think even people who don't like me would probably agree is true, which is that I get more of these things than anybody else. Any other reader, any other critic, any other editor. My year-end lists, the Steve Reed's list of the year's best and worst books, are pretty exhaustive, and they're done by one sexy 28-year-old, not the whole book section staff of a newspaper. So I console myself only with that. It is an impossible task in the American book market. That's 300,000 books a year. But I think I come closer to it than anybody else. So I'm going to take these 3 questions and combine them into one and tour you through a small selection of the new releases I have yet to get to that I very much am looking forward to, that I very much want to do, even if I know I'm going to hate them. So the first one is H.W. Brands. I've mentioned this author on this channel many times before as a historian. He's very, very good. And he is doing a book on Roosevelt versus Lindbergh, America First. The first time that Nazi-sympathetic, fascist-sympathetic, know-nothing American party adopted a slogan called America First. It took a century, but it has been adopted again by another fascist party, another party that says the less you know about something, the more of a patriot with a capital P you are. And that also, much like Lindbergh and his backers, although more explicit, wants to murder its opponents. It's important to understand about America First the first time around, and it's important to understand it about the second time around, is that they don't just want to win at the ballot box. They want to murder their opponents. I don't know what kind of a job Brands will do, but he has very seldom disappointed me. So I'll be happy to see. Then we have Carolyn Burt and Richard Partington. This is Arise England, and it's a dream come true for me. It's a great big, I think it's 700 or 800 page history of the Plantagenets. That's fantastic. I can't get enough of this particular family, not only because of two of my favorite movies of all time, but also because they are just all larger than life figures. And this is, I guess, going through all the Plantagenets. From first to last. So I'm greatly looking forward to it. Don't know what kind of a song and dance number I'll have to do to make sure I get a copy, but I want a copy. I think we've seen this before. This is Wright Thompson's book, The Barn, about the murder of Emmett Till. I don't know the secret history of the subtitle. I haven't read this yet, but I don't think I've read any of the ones that are on this list that I'm going to show you. I don't know what the secret history means. We know that the history of Emmett Till. Maybe it means just that Wright Thompson has done some extra legwork, done some more reporting. I'll find out when I get to it. It will be incredibly gruesome, incredibly depressing. But then we have Evan Frith. This is The Bookshop, A History of American Bookstores. I don't know if this will include secondhand bookstores, but I have such a long history with American retail bookstores, such a long history with them. I've gone to so many of them. I was a loyal member of so many different chains that don't exist anymore. And in addition to that, as a cherry on top of all that, I worked in an American retail bookstore for 25 years. So it's a subject that I know a lot about it, first of all, and I'm also very much interested in it. It kills me that Boston, the home of American literacy, doesn't have a retail bookstore of any major size. But we don't have a Crocs and Botanos, we don't have B. Dalton, we don't have a Barnes & Noble, but Barnes & Noble does still exist as a company. I'll be interested to know what's covered in here. I think I can guess that this book is going to completely ignore chain bookstores, except maybe to mention them as bogeymans, as villains, but otherwise just completely ignore them. The loving profiles that I imagine will be all throughout this book will be of tiny indie bookstores, which I'm sure those profiles will be interesting, but I've seen that kind of exclusion done many, many times before, and the only point I want to make to Evan Frith, and I'll do it in a review, is that is bad history. That is very, very bad history. Virtue signaling has no place in the writing of history. But we'll see. He might surprise me. Then a book I've mentioned before. This is by Max Boot, who I have reviewed before. And this is his forthcoming book, A Big Fat Biography of Ronald Reagan, which every reviewer I know has a galley copy of this but me. I don't know why that is true. I have requested it from the publicist. I've requested it from its own publicist. I've requested it over the transom, and specifically, I've said in those requests that I am waiting on a copy of this book. I'm the only critic I know who is. I don't know why it hasn't arrived. I don't know why it hasn't come to me. I'll just keep asking. Periodically and diplomatically, courteously, I will keep asking. But it's odd. I mean, I kind of like Max Boot as an author. I don't know what I will get with this book. I don't like the mention of legend in the subtitle. That is, I'm hyper prone, hypersensitive to the way that Reagan biographers do their job poorly. It's very hard to find a good book on this particular historical figure. He is usually a stalking horse for the author's own prejudices or the author's own dreams. And that might be satisfying to write, and it might be satisfying for some people to read, but again, it is bad biography. So we'll see what I make of this when I finally get it. I think it will be rather astonishing if when it comes time for my year-end best biographies of the year, I have to mention in the prologue to the best biographies that I never saw a copy of this book, and so I cannot rate it one way or another. I'm just assuming that something odd is going on, some miscommunication one way or another. But it's going to be a big release. So is this next one. This is Citizen by Bill Clinton. And this is his book, his in heavy air quotes, about his post-presidency activities, his post-presidency years. I will read this, certainly. I read his book, the great big book about my life. I read his book. I especially like the second half of it on his presidency. This is going to be full of lies. And I don't know what, knowing that ahead of time, I don't know what quite to do with it. I also can't gauge what kind of coverage it will get. Ordinarily, I'm pretty good at that. The Max Boot Reagan book, for instance, will be reviewed everywhere. Literally everywhere. It will be amazing to me if Open Letters does not review it. Because, for some reason, some publicist somewhere said, don't send that copy to Steve. Don't send him a copy. Send it to everybody else you want, but not him. But this, I don't know how widely this will get reviewed. And it's a weird, melancholy experience to know that going into this book, my job as a critic, as a reader, is going to be to figure out how and in what ways this book lies, rather than going into it assuming that it will not lie and being surprised if I encounter a lie here and there. This book is going to lie epically about the Clinton Foundation, for instance. I'm not talking about weird conservative conspiracy theories about the Clinton body count. I'm talking about things that are documented. Bill Clinton is his post-presidency life is the Clinton Foundation. He's going to have to lie about it. A lot of lying about it. And also, when I get a finished copy of this book and I turn to the index, am I going to find anything under Epstein? The other thing, aside from the Clinton Foundation, for which Clinton's post-presidency is known, am I going to find even a mention of that? Of course I'm not. It's not only that Clinton is going to want to lie about that, it's that this book is going to go through 10 layers of lawyers before it ever gets to the market. They're not going to allow anything like that. They're not going to allow him to write in a book, the equivalent of, I never had sex with that woman. That got him impeached. This could get him thrown in jail at the age of 90. He's not going to write in a book that I went to Epstein's Island, and I was good friends with him, and I had many, many conversations with him, but I did nothing salacious or out of order on his island. There are video records of everything that happened on that island. They haven't been made public, but they have been seized. His lawyers know that. They aren't going to let him say anything except lie. So I don't know. You're probably perceiving here that I don't have a lot of affection for the historical figure of Bill Clinton at all. I could go on at great length about the damage that he did to this country, about the wholesale pallet loads of cynicism that he introduced into this country's political system, especially into presidential politics. I watched with my jaw hanging open while a sitting U.S. president said it depends on what the meaning of is. But anyway, I'm going to read it anyway because it's a major release. And then there's this. This is by Stephen Watts. This is Citizen Cowboy. And this is a big biography, the first one in a long time that I know of Will Rogers, who will be a little bit hard to explain to non-American readers. I don't imagine this will have any non-American readers, but I'll be curious to know. Will Rogers crafted very carefully a loving public persona. I will be interested to know if Stephen Watts examines the non-lovable parts of this figure. There were plenty, and they have been in books before. So not a full-dress biography. I guess it's the same question that I have with the Reagan book. I wonder how much affection this will front-load. A biography shouldn't front load any affection, but I think it's inevitable with a figure like Will Rogers. So I'll just wait to see how much affection will be pumped in first, and then dispelled or just enhanced. Again, I guess I'm just going into the book expecting that I will be lied to, and unlike with Clinton, I don't know the subject of Will Rogers really well. With Clinton, if you lie to me, I'm going to know. I was following every detail of his administration. With Will Rogers, you might lie to me, and I might not know. I don't know the figure well enough. I'll try. I'll do my best. Then we have Ramachandra Guha, who is great. I've praised his books on this channel many, many times. This is a bit of an odd thing. This is a literary memoir of his. It's not a gigantic, monumental work of history or biography. It's a literary memoir of his relationship with his editor. It's called The Cooking of Books. And apparently, he and the editor in question have a contentious relationship. So I don't know what I'm going to get here. I imagine that it will be, and I know that it would be really well written, but it could really hit a sweet spot of mine, which is publishing industry memoirs. It's very niche. Not many people are interested in those sorts of things, but it could do that. Most times, a publishing industry memoir is just a time bomb. No one wants to write them because you never know if you're going to need the publishing industry. Or not so much you might say, well, once you reach 90, you could write an incendiary publishing memoir because you're not going to need the industry anymore. But you have friends or relatives or ex-students, and the publishing industry knows those connections, and you don't want to hurt them. It's the equivalent. It's the civilian equivalent of the people that Henry VIII condemned to death, getting up on the scaffold and singing his praises, because you're leaving people behind. You want him to be merciful to them. Then we have Forrest Claypool. I don't remember how long this book is. This is The Daily Show, and this is his look at the terms of Chicago's Richard Daley, which is a fascinating subject. As I don't know that I've read a good book on this subject, and I don't suspect that this will be one. Because Claypool has a dog in the race. He has the ultimate dog in the race. He was best friends with Daley and his chief of staff for years and years and years. He is not going to give a warts and all account of Daley's term. And there are plenty of warts. Plenty of them. So, Daley had huge failings running Chicago. Huge failings. Including the one that sticks out in my mind naturally today, since it's boiling hot in Boston, is that there was a massive heat wave in Chicago. It's been the subject of at least 3 books that I know of. There was a massive heat wave in Chicago, and he ignored it. People died. Lots of people died that would not have died if he just basically ignored it. He did almost nothing. And there were a lot of other things, too, a lot of shady things. He was as much a shady figure as he was an honest broker. And I don't think Claypool is going to give me that in this book, but he could surprise me. You never know. The whole reason that I'm in this is because I occasionally get surprised like this. Then we have Dan Conley. This is Down to the Sea in Submarines. This is a book, a history of the Royal Submarine Corps, the English Submarine Corps in World War II. It has deeper roots than that. I don't know how wide-ranging this will be. I'm always up for this, especially after just having recently done a read-along on this channel of The Cruel Sea by Nicholas Montserrat. I'm totally interested again in this subject. But naval histories and naval memoirs of any kind, I'm always interested in them. If this guy has any kind of narrative chops, this is a great story. The submarine warfare, not so much submarine warfare, submarine dueling in the so-called silent war during the Cold War is fascinating. I've read 5 or 6 books on the subject, and the drama involved, you wouldn't expect that it would be. You'd think it would all be very closeted, but there's a lot of drama. I hope that this author does it justice. Then we have high fantasy, epic fantasy. This is John Gwynne. He is finally finishing up his trilogy with The Fury of the Gods. So we don't have a giant wolf on the cover, and we don't have a giant dragon on the cover. Instead, we have a giant serpent on the cover. The wolf, this is heavily influenced by Norse mythology, this fantasy cycle. The wolf, of course, is the Fenris wolf. Dragons are all over the place in Norse mythology, and the serpent would be the Midgard serpent, Jormungand. But I very much enjoy this series. I've very much enjoyed it so far. I've read the first 2 volumes. I think I've reread the first 2 volumes a couple of times. They're very, very influenced by TV. specifically by Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If John Gwynne does not know Buffy the Vampire Slayer inside and out, I would be amazed. Utterly amazed. In other words, this is epic fantasy that has commercial breaks, if you know what I mean. You're reading a scene, and then the scene wraps up very neatly, and one character turns basically to the camera and gives a quip, a Buffy-style quip. And then we move on to somewhere else, and the whole thing repeats itself. There were elements of that, little fugitive elements of that in George R.R. Martin's books. I think those elements got a little more pronounced as the books went on. They're all over this series. It's really good. It's really, really enjoyable, but I kept expecting, in the first two books, there were so many scenes where the scene wrapped up, and I kept expecting I was going to see an ad from Mentos or something like that. But I've been very much looking forward to this book. I think, if I remember correctly, John Gwynne's sons, the brothers Gwynne, have a YouTube channel. They have a booktube channel. And William Gwynne, I think, has a channel. Yeah, William Gwynne has a separate channel of his own. And if I remember correctly, on one of their recent videos, John Gwynne actually filmed himself finishing this book at his typewriter, or his computer, just writing the end to this book. That's a wonderful moment to immortalize if that's real, if it's real. I know a lot of authors who would love to have a picture of the minute when they finally breach birth this horrible bloody thing that has been controlling their lives for years. But it's really good action-oriented epic fantasy, so I'm glad that it's finally finishing. Then we have Nick Lloyd. This is a big work of history. This is Eastern Front. This is his history of the neglected front in World War I, the front that doesn't get as much action as the bloody fields of France, but that was pivotal to the war. Everyone thought so, even at the time, and that is full of great personalities. I think I've read probably about 8, 9 studies of the Eastern Front, but I like Nick Lloyd. This will probably be the big sweeping book that I want on the subject, certainly that's recent. I don't know exactly when it comes out. I don't know. I don't remember the release dates for any of these things, except the Reagan book, which I know is a September release. Then we have Dan Jones. This is Henry V. Dan Jones is coming out with a full-dress biography of Henry V. And you might think, well, why the funny faces? That's because Dan Jones he's written Essex Dogs since then. He has broken out into another genre, and really, really successfully. So I guess there was a part of me that thought we would never get a book like this from him again. Why would you? When the profits, the sales of fiction are so much better than the sales of any nonfiction. But here it is. I don't know how much I can speak to Dan Jones's chops as a biographer, but I know he's a vivid writer. Henry V has had a lot of great biographies, including Desmond Stewart's book is still the best one that I've read, and it's like 40 or 50 years old. I still think it's called The Scourge of God is the subtitle, but his book is terrific. Just terrific. There are plenty of action. There's plenty of battles here. I don't know what kind of a job Dan Jones will do, but I am a fan of his now, so it doesn't matter. Then we have M.G. Sheftal. This is a big book called Hiroshima. And this is part 1. This author is going to do a 2-part look at the only times that atomic bombs have ever yet been used in war. So Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the only reason that we're not talking about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Tokyo is because Japan surrendered. And the only reason that we're talking about Hiroshima or Nagasaki at all is because the powers that be, and the buck stops with Harry Truman, decided that a televised demonstration of an uninhabited atoll somewhere in the South Pacific was not good enough. That in order to use this bomb that had never been used in combat before, we really need human victims to be vaporized. Lots of them. Lots of women and children vaporized or burned to a crisp, or a little bit further out, 10 blocks further out, third-degree burns over 80% of their body. So they don't die immediately, but they die in agony in a day. And then a whole generation poisoned by radiation. I gather from what I've read of this book that it's going to concentrate a lot on eyewitness accounts, like Hiroshima by John Hersey, and that it's also going to deal a lot with the whole picture, that this is meant to be the whole picture. So the preparations, the selection of Hiroshima as a bomb site, the nature of the city, the reasons why the Allies might have picked it, the exact nature of what happened when the bombs went off, when the bomb went off here, and the aftermath, the long, long aftermath of figuring out what had happened, figuring out who was alive and what kind of damage was done and what kind of long-term damage was done. And, of course, the companion volume will be Nagasaki. But I'm looking forward to this. Again, grim reading. But then we have a book by Ethan Tapper. I do not know if Ethan Tapper is related to Jake Tapper. I have not bothered to look. I don't want to know. In a sense, the part of me that doesn't want to know. Because this seems really interesting. It also has, for me, the nod of one of the best covers that I've seen in American release so far this year. This is How to Love a Forest. That is the cover. The publicity information for this thing is alarming. I don't know if you remember. I had a book last year in which a guy claims to be a nature lover and says that the best way to protect nature is to go out into its habitations and shoot it dead. Shotgun conservationist or something like that. The pub information that I've seen for this says sort of the same thing, that the best way to love a tree is to chop it down. That's just the pub sheet, and that's very advanced. I think this is months away. So this seems to be the author bonding with forests. And that has potential. That has potential to be terrifically moving. I've read a lot of books like that were. So greatly looking forward to this. Hoping that it doesn't disappoint. Of course, I'm not hoping that with any of these things. Then we have something I think I've shown you before. This is Robert Suttinger. This is a biography of Hugh Yaobang. This is The Conscience of the Party, in which this author is going to try to play up Hugh's role as a gadfly to the Chinese Communist Party, as a person who wanted to humanize it, who wanted to soften it. I'm very much into this subject. I've done a lot of reading on this subject so far in 2024. I don't see that there's a way to do that, honestly, but I want the book to convince me. So we will see. Certainly he had that reputation, that handle, even in his own lifetime. I don't believe it. So we will see. If he were literally those things, he'd have died. He'd have been executed in a closet somewhere. And we'll see. We'll see what the author does. I don't know the subject nearly well enough to call him on errors, but I will be able to police general tone, which is good. Then we have something by Harvey Whitehouse. I don't know what I'm going to get here. It could be really good, like the early book that we got, the Invention of Prehistory, or it could be really bad. It could be just a big gaseous ball, a gaseous anomaly. This is called Inheritance, and the subtitle is The Evolutionary Origins of the Modern World. I think this is going to be Evo Devo mapped onto geopolitics in the present moment. That's not only dangerous, but obviously fraudulent. So I don't know what I'm going to get here. This could be a really good popular science introduction to the idea of evolution by means of natural selection and what humans are evolutionarily speaking. What are we disposed to evolutionarily speaking? Or it could be just gloop. It could be woo. I don't know. I'll report back. It's a long way off, I think. Well, then we have a romance. This is by an author that I have never read before because I would remember this name. Her name is Sandra Sookoo. Sookoo. It's a Regency romance called It Happened at Christmas. A modern Regency romance. Don't know what to expect here. I have a whole bookcase full of modern Regency romance authors, but this is a new one to me, and I want, if I've never read this author, I want to see what kind of energy she brings to a little subgenre of romance that I love. I love these Regency romances, either old ones or the modern ones where people are tearing their clothes off. I love them as palate cleansers. Right? We all have our different idea of palate cleansers. Some of you big brains out there, will use a big 800-page history as a palate cleanser to another 800-page history, or a string of them. I don't. Some of you use murder mysteries. I knew plenty of readers in my life. Murder mysteries, little 170-page murder mysteries were their palate cleanser of choice. And lots of you use all sorts of other things. Graphic novels, for instance. Regency romances tend to be mine. I have a whole selection of palate cleansers, but these tend to be mine. We'll see if it's any good. Then we have, this is by David Cohen, and this is another naval book, another naval history. This is a biography of Fleet Admiral Ernest King, King's Navy. No idea what's going on with that cover. I'm hoping this is not the final version of the cover. But this is Ernest King, one of the architects of reshaping the American Navy. Him and Admiral Sims were under two different Roosevelts, under Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt. But King was an abrasive, visionary figure. I have his book here, and I really enjoyed it, even though I got the impression when I was done with it that I wouldn't have wanted to spend 5 minutes in a room with him. And I guess that this book will probably give me the same impression. I think this is it's the subtitle, you can't really make it out. The subtitle is about the reorganization, the revisioning of the American Navy to take over the world, to be the strongest military force in the world, which it was under King and which it still is. Not only in the world, but in the history of the world. The American Navy is everywhere. It's where you don't think it is, and it is pretty much a game changer when it enters the Med or the Gulf of Tonkin or whatever. In a large part of what it is, it owes to this man. But I think this is also a biography. I think this is going to be, I don't know how long it is, but I think it's going to be a biography as well. I'm totally up for it. Then we have another biography. This is by Tsuyoshi Mesegawa, and it is The Last Tsar. This is the abduction and the execution of Nicholas II. But from what I gather, it's going to have a lot of biography in it as well. I'm totally up for that, no matter what. I'm totally up for that. I think this figure is absolutely fascinating, tragic and fascinating. And I'm always up to read the next book about him. Every publishing year, maybe not every publishing season, but every publishing year will give us at least a couple of books on the Romanovs. I showed you one the other day, The Hunt for the Romanovs. And this is more standard. This is more of just a general look at what happened to the Romanovs, the ending of the Romanovs. Every year has a couple of those new releases, and I always look forward to them. I always learn something from them. Then this next one is by Douglas Egerton. And it is a Steve book, believe it or not. I know that on this channel you're accustomed to seeing Steve books that I haul from the Brattle bookshop that are 100 years old. But there are occasionally Steve books out in the new retail world. I do not know. I know a lot of bookish people. I know a lot of bookish people. Off BookTube, I mean. Editors and publicists and writers, reviewers. I know a lot of those people. I don't know any one of them, not one of them, who will read this book voluntarily. In fact, the closer it gets to the light of day, I think this is down the line in the autumn, the closer it gets to the light of the day, the more of those people are going to be emailing me saying, hey, this is a Steve book. Can you tell me if this is going to be any good? Do you actually, is this going to be worthwhile to assign? Is this major? Is this important? I bet I get emails like that. I don't know whether it's a sign of professional respect or professional failure that those emails have not for years and years included an offer for me to write about the book. I have my own venues. And I rather like that. So almost never, those emails almost never come with, hey, is this going to be any good? And if it is, do you want to write about it? We'll see. We'll see. This is a biography of Thomas Wentworth Higginson, whose name will not be known to most of you, I would guess. His name is not known in Boston anymore, but 100 years ago it was. Everybody knew this name 100 years ago. This is called A Man on Fire. And it continues the trend that we've seen in some new biographies of digitally remastering and recoloring a black and white daguerreotype of the person involved. We saw it with Garfield last year, and also with McKinley a couple of years before that. Can't say that I object. I do object to the weird whatever that was that we saw on that biography of Charles Sumner. That weird face of his that doesn't look anything like him. I did not know what to make of that. But this is lovingly done. This is carefully done. That's what Higginson would have looked like as a young man. And he is a fascinating figure. I would hope that this gets reviewed somewhere. I would like it if it did. But I'd be willing to bet that, for instance, the Boston Globe, the mainstream newspaper of Boston, will not review this. I'd be willing to bet they won't. They do barely any book reviews. I'll have to hope. Well, first of all, I'll have to hope that it's good. I'll have to hope that it's worth the reviews. But I haven't read. I have a collection of Higginson's letters. I have his books, and I've read them many times and love them. And I also have, there was a biography of him, a life and letters type thing, big sumptuous thing that was done 100 years ago, more. But I don't think I've read a biography of him any later than that. The closest I think we get is a dual biography that came out about 15 years ago. I'm greatly looking forward to this, but it is very much a Steve book. I'm not trying to push it on anybody else. And then we have James Bradley. This is not a Steve book. I know everything there is to know about this subject, but it's not a Steve book. He's not one of my pet subjects. I just know it because I've read a million things in which he appears. But it is the history buff type of thing. It is the biography buff type of thing, because it's a presidential biography, and those always do well in the American book market. And this is a biography of Martin Van Buren, who hasn't had a presidential biography in a long, long time. So the subtitle calls him America's first politician. That's insane. But I imagine that the author will try to justify that somehow. Probably in the introduction. I'll probably be done with that horse hockey in the introduction. Then we'll get down to basics. Then we'll get down to Martin Van Buren and what you can do about it. And Martin Van Buren is he's a fascinating figure. Every U.S. president has a discrete number of firsts connected with them. Whether it's, I don't know, Washington, of course, is the first president, but also, well, you can go down the list. John Adams is first president from New England. Andrew Jackson, first president to engage as a matter of public policy in a genocide. William Howard Taft, first president to be both president and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Richard Nixon, first president to resign. Donald Trump, first president to organize an armed insurrection to overthrow the government. They all have their first. Van Buren has a few firsts. He's a marginally interesting figure. I'll be interested in what this author can do with it. Then we have a figure. I think I've shown you this book before. I'm gonna read it, no doubt about it. It's. I don't know that it's gonna get reviewed anywhere, but it has a built-in audience. That's for sure. I don't know that I'd want to meet any of them in a closed elevator either. This is Yuval Noah Harari. This is his new book Nexus, about mass communication, about basically AI networks. So he does his normal shtick. That's a passenger pigeon on the cover there to show you what communication networks used to be like. But he will take a modern preoccupation, something in the modern world. In this case, it would be mass communications, telecommunications, AI, and read it back into the past, usually ham-handedly and ineptly. As is going to happen when an author knows that he has 1 million book sales. Harari knows that he has 1 million book sales, regardless of what the book is, because of Sapiens, because of his book Sapiens. He knows that he has 1 million book sales. 999,000 of them going to people who don't read and who've only read his book. And books like this, 4-Hour Work Week, 12 Rules for Life, that sort of thing. He knows that he has that audience, and usually it's a bad thing when an author knows that they have an audience. It's a recipe for them to get lazy. We will see, though. There are parts of Sapiens that I like. It could surprise me. Then we have Leanne Hennon. This is Night Magic, the latest in a little trend, a little tradition of nature books about the stuff that comes out at night, the animals that live in the nighttime, who don't like to be seen in the daytime, who have adapted to a nighttime existence. I've read, I don't know, probably 100 books like this, and they're always charming. They're always really good. Sometimes they have their own agenda. I've read a couple of them that are about the night animals in New York Central Park. A couple of them in Boston. But I'm always interested in seeing. I find this world fascinating. Every once in a great while in my dog-owning life, I have been able to go out and experience this world. I can't right now. I have one little dog now. There is the needlepoint version of my little dog now. I have one little dog now, and not only does she have nothing in the way of night vision, her night vision is literally worse than mine. And my night vision is excellent. It's much, much better than yours. I can read in what you would consider darkness. So it holds no terrors for me, but it holds a lot of terrors for my little dog. She jumps at every shadow. And you might think, okay, well then just go, out to the woods without her. No, she doesn't like that either. She doesn't pay much attention to me when I'm around, but she doesn't like me to be gone. But occasionally in my life, I have had dogs that either didn't mind that I was gone, like for instance, for 6 or 7 years, 5 or 6 years, including while I had this channel, I had 2 very old dogs, very old and then very sick dogs, who slept literally 22 and a half hours out of every 24. So they didn't know that I was gone. It didn't give them a chance to be traumatized. They didn't know that I was out traipsing around in the Arboretum or Forest Hill Cemetery or whatnot. And every once in a blue moon, I've had a dog, a beagle, who wanted to go with me. And so I have seen a lot of this nightlife. It'd be fascinating to read about, unless the author's bad. Then we have a novel, piece of fiction, just keep my hand in. This is by Richard Chismar. I don't think I have ever read this author. The subtitle says New York Times bestselling author. I don't think I've ever read this author. This is called Memorials. And from what I gather, it is Appalachian horror. The standard gimmick, the standard premise, a group of friends, normal people from the bright sunlit world, go deeper and deeper into the Appalachians, and they encounter more and more of these odd, weird, semi-occult memorials, and they're getting more and more lost, and the world, the trees, the area, the air around them is getting darker and more menacing, and then there's a payoff. If it is that, if it is just Appalachian horror, I don't know how much it's going to do for me, but I'll be interested in seeing if this author, I don't know this author, I'll be interested in seeing if this author can write. That'll be true even with the stuff that I know I'm not interested in. And then we have Roland Allen. This is The Notebook. This is just a history of the notebook, a history of thinking on paper. The pub materials for this accurately describe that notebooks, as a piece of technology, have changed the world. I read that at first. My first reaction was, oh, come on, that's true. That's absolutely true. And I've never read A History of the Notebook before. I've read the novel, The Notebook, by Nicholas Sparks, which is one of the worst novels ever written. But I never read a history of the notebooks. I wonder how big this will be. I wonder how wide-ranging it will be. Immediately, I started thinking of notebooks that I know of that have been published, or notebooks that haven't been published because they don't exist anymore, but we know from history that they were important. In other words, I'm dying to know how wide-ranging this is. I will report back. Then we got to have something for the gays. You got to have something for the gays. In this case, as opposed to disposable tentacle fiction or meet-cute hockey romance, I have our greatest living gay author, who's also, in my opinion, one of the greatest novelists working in the English language today, and that's Alan Hollinghurst. And he has a new book, Our Evenings. The cover design wants to reinforce how cool it is to smoke. It's just been the most coolest thing in the world. You reek. Everyone around you reeks. Your pets die of lung cancer. You die of lung cancer. It's great. What's not to like? But the description I have of this book makes me a little bit leery of calling it his new book. I think Alan Hollinghurst is very much a novelist in the Trollope vein. I don't think he'd object to this. I very much a novelist in the sense that he knows his patch and he's just going to work it. He's not, when he assembles the materials, as they put it, for a new novel, he's not looking to break new ground. He wants to write the same kind of story. A fish out of water encountering the privileged upper class in a rarefied atmosphere with gay sex thrown in. And I don't mean to sound dismissive about that, because he does it really well. There's nothing wrong with the Trollope model, obviously. I'm Trollope's biggest fan. So that is the plot of this book, more or less. That is what you're going to get. And you're going to, if you're a Hollinghurst fan, or maybe just more distant orbit than that, you read him sometimes, maybe read Line of Beauty, but you're not a fan. Either way, if you're familiar with this author at all, you're going to notice right away that this book is very similar in its preoccupations to his other books. There's nothing wrong with that. So, I'm greatly looking forward to it, and God, it will get reviewed everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Then we have a book by Ian Fraser. Ian Fraser is a serial nonfiction writer that I really like, but this latest book of his, well, I doubt it's going to get reviewed anywhere, or not widely. But it's got the mother of all fight starters right there in the subtitle. This is Paradise Bronx. It's a history of the Bronx, one of the boroughs of New York City. And the subtitle is The Life and Times of New York's Greatest Borough. Which already has bricks being thrown through Ian Fraser's windows from both Staten Island, they throw bricks anyway, they throw them recreationally, and also Queens. The reason that Staten Island, Queens, and the Bronx are also little dog feisty is because one of the other boroughs is Manhattan. Subtitle notwithstanding. In fact, the subtitle wraps into the picture of why I want to read this, because this sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. And Bronx history, I've read it before. And it's terrific. Sorry, my little dog is going nuts because we can't exercise. And it is driving her insane, slowly insane. I don't know what we're going to do. This is just 3 days. I don't know what we're going to do when we get 100-degree plus heat waves for 2 weeks at a time in late July. But anyway, let's just move on. Then we have, I don't know about this book. I hesitated whether or not to put it on the list. It's very much niche. It's 20th century Egyptian politics and history. I find it fascinating. I find Nasser fascinating. And that's what this is. This is the politics of melodrama. It's a I think from a rarefied publisher. If I'm remembering correctly, I would guess that this is probably going to be an expensive hardcover. But Nasser had a gadfly when he was in office, and the gadfly was the most unlikely person in the world. He was a writer of potboiler romances. He was a fiction writer, immensely popular. On a person-by-person, house-by-house, per capita basis, easily more popular than Nasser himself. And there was a kind of a dialogue or duel between them. It comes up in Nasser biographies, but this is a whole book about it. So, needless to say, it's not going to get reviewed anywhere at all, but I'm still going to enjoy it. Then we have another Princeton guide. I can't remember if we've seen this on this channel or not. This is Gregory Paul writing the Princeton Field Guide to Predatory Dinosaurs. And I love these are oversized hardcovers. They're heavily illustrated. They've got all sorts of maps and charts, the latest information, but also usually very good narration. I don't know that I know Gregory Paul, but I love predatory dinosaurs. In that regard, the part of Steve that loves dinosaurs has not grown any older than 8 years old. Because I love them. I love all the dinosaurs are just fascinating to me, but the predatory dinosaurs, especially the ceratopsids and whatnot, the really dangerous tyrannosaurids, maybe well, there are a whole bunch of them, but the tyrannosaurids, especially, of course, the marquee, the most famous dinosaur of them all, Tyrannosaurus rex, they are the best known predatory dinosaurs, and Tyrannosaurus rex was also, in most of his biomes, he was the apex of apex predators. Basically a killing and eating machine. This won't go into melodrama, but I'm really looking forward. I love all these Princeton guides anyway. Then we have a book called Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen. How many of you watch Brian Tyler Cohen on BookTube? He's a chiseled-chinned cutie patootie who decided, instead of wasting his way, in the fourth rung of Hollywood, he decided to become a political commentator. He's immensely successful at it. He's interviewed President Biden. He's interviewed Vice President Harris. He's interviewed all sorts of politicians. He is on the side of good. He hates the fascist movement in the United States. He hates stupid, syphilitic, posturing, wannabe dictators. He has a very entertaining style on camera, and it shot him to success. I don't remember how many millions of subscribers his YouTube channel has, but he has a bigger subscriber count than I do. And he has finally written a book, Shameless, with an introduction by Jamie Raskin, who is also been an interview foil of his many, many times. They have great chemistry on camera. And I haven't read this. I don't know how good it will be. I don't know. Brian Tyler Cohen in his video says it's always been his dream to write a book. And I believe, at least I'm going to believe, that he writes the scripts for his own videos. But there's a long haul between that and writing a piece of extended prose. So I don't know what this will be like as a reading experience. I hate to be prejudicial, but pretty people tend not to write good books. Sorry. I know that's awful sweeping, but we will see. I think that the organizing principle of this book is just what the title says. That in addition to all the depravities and all of the incredible rightward drift, the openly expressed fascism on the floor of the Congress, there's the accompanying element is that people are not shamed anymore. Shame has gone away from public politics. So we'll see if this really delves into that, or if this is mainly just an amalgamation of his show scripts. I don't know what to expect, but I'll read it and report back. Then we have Nathan Amin. This is Son of Prophecy. This is a biography of Henry Tudor. Not Henry VIII, but Henry Tudor, the founder of the Tudor dynasty. I have read, I think, 4 Henry Tudor biographies, and a couple of them were very, very good. Winter King was very good. And there was an older one, too, the Henry Tudor and the Rise of the Tudors, that I really, really liked. It's a great story. We'll just have to see what this is like. I don't particularly like the cover choice, but royal biography, I'm right there, especially Tudor biography. Then we have a book by Peter Marshall. This is Storm's Edge, and it is all about the nature, the people, the atmosphere of the Orkney Islands, where this author was born. I'm hoping that this is just interesting and piquant and genial. I'm hoping that it's not insider baseball. I'm hoping that I don't read a few pages and think, so not only were you born on the Orkney Islands, but I need to have been born there to get this. I don't think that will be the case. That's not the kind of book that you would market. It will probably just be really good and probably very eye-opening. There's probably a lot about the I've been to the Orkney Islands many times, so probably a lot about their history that I don't know. Then we have Julianne Long. Now, this is a romance writer that I know and very much like. And this is her book, The Beast Takes a Bride. Another modern Regency. Again, he doesn't have a shirt to his name. And they are basically engaging in it right there on the cover. And they will, in the book, long before they exchange hellos or, offer each other the salad fork. They will have already done it, probably on the same table. But this is a modern Regency. You have to allow for that. I like this author, and I think I've read all the other books in this series. So it's coming up. It's definitely on my list. Then we have one that I'm really looking forward to. This is this summer, so I could theoretically bump it up and read it tonight. This is Benjamin Nathan's To the Success of Our Hopeless Cause. This is about the various Soviet dissident movements that sprung up, both in the Soviet Union and, I think, outside the Soviet Union. It's a big, fat look, a historical look at some aspect of Soviet life. The last few years, each one of those years has had one of those books, and each time, that book has ended up being one of my favorites. It's a fruitful ground for historical inquiry, and it's bringing out the best in the people who do it. So, hoping for the best with this book. Then we have, this is another one I've shown you on this channel. This is David Hone. He's fantastic. You should look up his YouTube video, H-O-N-E, David Hone, on Tyrannosaurus Rex. Oh, my God. He's got the skull of a Tyrannosaurus Rex standing in front of him as he just lectures about what they're like. It's amazing. It's amazing how much you can glean from the records that are left in the rocks. This is his book, Uncovering Dinosaur Behavior. What they did and how we know what they did. And he's better than anybody placed to tell you that. So, I have this book, and it's on my list. Okay, well, we did Yuval Noah Harari. Now we'll do Jordan Peterson, who has a new book coming out, We Who Wrestle with God. This is part of a phenomenon that has people watching Jordan Peterson since he came out of his self-induced coma. A lot of people have been noticing that he's been getting more and more vocal in defense of a dumb, revanchist kind of piecemeal, Raggedy Ann version of 16th century Geneva Christianity. I think I know what I'm going to get in this book. He's not the only one doing that. That is all over the arch-conservative right, the fascist-friendly right, which Jordan Peterson is. For Pete's sakes, could we finally dispense with dancing around what this guy has become? The new fascist right that's poised to take over this country is poised to take over all of Europe. In addition to everything else, their hatred of minorities, their virulent hatred of women, they are also embracing this kind of, give me that old-time religion. We're men, we're in the public sphere, women are back at home, they're reproducing and making meals, but they're not in public anymore. And we men, well, the only time we ever bow the knee, bend the knee, or bow the head is to God. Not Muslim gods, not pantheistic gods, not Hindu gods. It's layer upon layer of bigotry and privilege. There's only one God, and we know who he is, and white men in starched white shirts have always wrestled with this God. We're proud men, we're empire builders, but we owe everything to him, and we must acknowledge that. I'm not expecting much from this book, not least because it has a lie right in the title. And that's hard to do. Even in the 21st century, that's hard to do, and it never bodes well for the book. Jordan Peterson does not wrestle with God. Jordan Peterson is an atheist. Let's pause for a minute, and then let me repeat that. Jordan Peterson is an atheist. He does not believe in any gods. All of his talk, all of his posturing, all of his word splicing. Well, it depends on what you mean by believe. It depends on what you mean by it. It depends on what you mean by me. All of that is a grift. All of it is. In the public sphere, just as a little tip, a little pro tip for you when you're watching YouTube, if you see a video by anybody where at any point in the video they say they are wrestling with the concept of God, they are either an arch-conservative believing Christian or they're an atheist and grifting. But Jordan Peterson isn't wrestling with God. We who wrestle with God is ridiculous. He's an atheist. He is looking, as so many of these people are, the reason why the revanchist fascist movement is embracing this kind of weird, gimme this old-time science-denying religion, is because it is the perfect philosophical framework from which they can oppress people. That's what they like it for. It allows them to be mean. I'm going to read it anyway. It's not going to get reviewed. I doubt it's going to get reviewed, unless sardonically, which I think would be a mistake. There are millions of young men in the world who would slit their parents' own throat if Jordan Peterson so much as hinted that they should. That means that you should take the book seriously, I think. Believe it or not, we're at the last book. We're at the last book here. This is Christopher Cox, an author I tend to like, and this is a new biography of Woodrow Wilson. And there is another colorized, humanized photo manipulation for the cover. I am up for any presidential biography. That's a couple on this list alone. I'm not a big fan of Wilson, but I'm always up for whatever a writer can do, whatever kind of an insight the writer can give me. So I'll definitely read it. Now let's move on, because we did those 3 questions. We still have the rest of the tag to do. This always slows me down here. Frida, cut it out, little girl. I'm going to give her a bath later today. We'll see if that calms her down. But let's move on to questions that don't involve upcoming books. Of course, that's going to be the longest digression for me, because it's all that I'm about is upcoming new releases. So let's see. Where did we leave off? We skipped to question number 5, biggest disappointment. In nonfiction, that would be reading Genesis by Marilyn Robinson. So far, I thought it was flat. I thought it was absolutely flat. From our greatest living author, I was expecting a lot more as she looks at the book of Genesis. I set actually a bar for myself. Some of you who watch this channel for a long time will know that occasionally my friend Sam, who is a book critic, guest stars on this channel. He comes on and we chat. Sam and I have talked about the book of Genesis quite a bit. And the bar that I set, informal talks over wine and calzones, the bar that I set for reading Genesis by Marilyn Robinson, for Pete's sake, was that it should be better than our talks on Genesis. It should be more insightful and deeper. And it wasn't. It wasn't at all. So I'm going to give it another read later on in the year. A lot of times her stuff sneaks up on me, so we will see. And then for fiction, it would be The Second Coming by Garth Risk Halbert, whose debut, City on Fire, was not only reviewed literally everywhere, even the weeklies, the shopping weeklies reviewed that book, but also netted him a huge income, a huge advance, and huge royalties. And part of me thought, in fact, I said on this channel, I think, that he struck me as someone who would get all of that and never write another book. A lot of authors are like that. They don't want to admit it. But a lot of them, that huge work that it is keeping up at night, that's the only thing they really have to contribute. And once they're done with that, especially if it's a massive success, they don't do anything else. But he came out with another book, and it got panned pretty much everywhere. And I thought it was incredibly disappointing. I didn't know what to do with it at all. It like reading Genesis. I will give it another try, but I doubt very much that it will go from the bottom of the heap to the top of the heap. It was a misfire. I know that's often said about sophomore novels, but it was a misfire, I thought. Then question number 6 is the biggest surprise. This would be a novel. I think we saw it in this channel. It was by Richard Walter, and it's called Deadpan, in which an anti-Semitic bigot wakes up in the body of a Jewish comedian. So it's like a weird version of the Metamorphosis by Kafka. And I was expecting that it would be a lot of what has been referred to as Borscht Belt humor and a few leadened insights into the nature of bigotry. I thought it worked on a lot more levels than that. I thought it was a lot better than that. It really, really deserves a wider audience. Then question number 7 is favorite new author, debut, or new to you. And when I saw that new to you, I was prepared to bridle. How dare you? How dare you suggest that any author is new to me? But we just saw recently Duncan Hamilton wrote a book about cricket called One Long Beautiful Summer that I really, really enjoyed. And I'd never read any Duncan Hamilton before. And that book was so good that it made me want to read more by him. I don't think he has an American publisher. I don't think he's ever come out in this country. But I really, really enjoyed it. And that's not new. That's just new to me. So there you go. A little humble pie for me to eat. Then number 8 is the YA question. Your newest fictional crush. Can we dispense with this? At least in the Mid-Year Freakout Tag 2.0, we will dispense with this, because that's a dumb question. That's for breathless teenagers or the aforementioned bearded, belching, burping adults who want to pander to teenagers in order to get their money. So I replaced it with number 8 is, how does your reading break down in terms of reading mechanism? Paper, ebook, audiobook. Now at the halfway point of the year, how does that break down? And for me, significantly higher percentage now than last year was ebook. Significantly higher. I love the feeling of reading ebooks. I know that's weird for somebody who just got 100 books, 100 used books, who gets books in the mail all the time, but I really enjoy the feeling of reading new books in ebooks. Not only because it's so easy, but because they're always there. You don't have to get settled in bed, have your little schnauzer curl up on your chest, and then realize that the galley you want is in the other room. But also, they're easily searchable and annotatable. For me, print books is still more, because I get all these books at the Brattle and I get print books in the mail, but the percentage for ebooks is creeping up. And of course, I don't do audiobooks at all. But what are your percentages? If we make that question number 8 instead of your fictional crush. Then question number 9, newest favorite character. So far, this is a little dodgy for me. It will certainly change by the end of the year. But so far, that is the character of James from the novel James by Percival Everett, which is a retelling, a reimagining of Huck Finn by Mark Twain. The James that's in Percival Everett's book is not only different from the Jim in Huck Finn, but cannot be him in any way. The James in Percival Everett's book is the outcome of a fantasy version of the slave experience in the United States, where brutalized, exploited, and especially, crucially, uneducated slaves are secretly sounding and thinking like Percival Everett. There's something satisfying in that, but that's not real. And that is the version of James that we get. That's the version of Jim that we get in James, is that version. When he's not talking to white people, his interiority, if you want to use that horrible word, is that. It's that fantasy version that has cropped up in other books that I've read, but never more beautifully done than this book. And that James is my favorite character so far this year, I think. Then let's see here. Question number 10. Book that made you cry. Books don't make me cry. Again with the waterworks. Books don't make me cry. The death of an old friend makes me cry. The failing of an old friend. Body failing, health failing. That will sometimes make me cry. In private, John Wayne clips. If I've had enough wine and I'm in the right company, might make me tear up. But books don't make me cry. No. If I'm doing my job right, I make them cry. Then question number 11. Books that made you happy. Believe it or not, despite all the horrifying and crappy titles that I've mentioned in this video, all books make me happy. All of them do. They are the greatest adventure in the world that you can do right there in the comfort of your own bed. They are the greatest adventure in the world. You open the cover of a book and you don't know what's going to happen. In the book or to you. And that is true even with the books that I have shown you in this video where I'm 100% certain I know what I'm getting. It's still true with them. That's the part of the amazing thing about books, is that it's the ultimate adventure. You don't know what they will do. There aren't any that make me unhappy. There are some that make me frustrated or angry. Some whose guts I'm happy to rip out, but not that they all make me happy. All of them do. Then prompt number 12, most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. For me, it would be bought. It would be that gorgeous Ace hardcover of Dune that David and I found at Provincetown. Not just the visit that just ended, but the visit before that, where we went out to Provincetown. And it just happened to be there. I'd been tempted to buy that hardcover new at Amazon. So we found it at a used bookstore, and it is gorgeous. It's not as gorgeous as the Folio Society edition of Dune, but I've never found a copy of that was in any way affordable. Not in any way, so I don't have it. But that Ace version gives it some stiff competition. Gorgeous end papers, gorgeous cover, gorgeous dust jacket, just everything about it I love. So, and then finally, question number... Oh, no, that's it, because we did question number 13. We moved question number 4, 13, and 5 into one question about new releases. So that is it. Very sorry for the length of this video, but that is it. That is the Mid-Year Freakout Tag 2024. It took a lot of time for me to pull all of these things together and think about them a bit. And now I'm putting that monkey's paw curse on you. If David Novak and I have done this, then you now have to do this, whether it's a Thursday or not. Get cracking on your Mid-Year Freakout Tag because Steve and David insist that you do it. And you don't want to get on our bad side. I don't think he has a bad side. And I don't really have one either. But, because how could I show my bad side on BookTube? make a video excoriating your channel, you'll get 500 subscribers. Because all of you know I don't mean it. So, either way, you now have the monkey's paw. You must now do the Mid-Year Freakout Tag. You don't have to do it today, but it should be the tag you do next Tuesday. All of you. I want to know where all of you stand on now that the year is halfway done, now that we've officially entered into the season of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So there you go. That is at long last an end to this tag. Very sorry for the length of the video. I'll be back. Thank you.